Good.
I'll get started here shortly, then we'll open it up to questions. So just in terms of the offseason itself, Ted, walk us through what have some of the changes been and how excited you are now that we're looking here at about 10 days away from the start of the season.
Yeah, so welcome everybody back to now Shell Energy Stadium, one of the many changes that's occurred this offseason. The last time I think many of us were here was before a capacity crowd hosting the Dash's first ever playoff game. And right after that concluded, we went hard to work, as you can see, installing our new mesh seats, which are being installed throughout the stadium. The East Club, which is nearing completion as well. And of course, many changes on the roster side for both the Dynamo and the Dash, as well as the coaching staffs, and many other changes and improvements, which is our continuing mission to improve the quality of the play on the field, improve the fan experience, and make an impact on the community. So with that, happy to dive into your questions and address anything on your mind.
Well, there is always excitement when the new season is coming. How would you describe yourself in terms of that excitement after all these changes?
Well, at the dawn of any new season, there is tons of excitement and anticipation. I can't wait for the kickoff next week in Cincinnati. I'll be there eagerly anticipating the kickoff for the Dynamo, and of course, just about a month later, back here again for the Dash debut, and the preceding week, opening up the stadium for the first time for the Dynamo and for the fans to experience the changes that are concluding right now.
Can you outline some of the objectives that you have for this season for the Dynamo and the Dash, and what you would like to see on the field? We've kind of already seen what's going on outside of the field.
Yeah, so the objective is always is to contend for a playoff spot and ultimately contend for championships. And so we've made two significant changes at the top of the organizations for the coaching staffs on both the Dynamo and the Dash, and Ben Olsen and Sam Lady. And I know that they're hard at work with augmenting and working with their rosters to set their respective squads up for success. There's been a significant amount of turnover in each of those rosters. I was looking back at, for example, the Dynamo roster and comparing it to when I came in roughly 18 months ago. And don't quote me specifically on this, but I would say there's under a handful, fewer than 5 players on the roster right now who were on the roster when I came in June of 2021. So it is a new roster. These types of overhauls take some time to gel and for players to fit in, recognize the direction of the coaching staff and how they play together. But there's a lot of optimism with what we've done and who we've brought in.
When you took over the club over 2 years ago, is this the place where you envision to be in 2023, and what more can we expect going forward?
So a phrase I've been using a lot is under construction, and you see it tangibly here. But I think it is a reflection of our entire organization. And so, look, I work in real estate. Any construction project doesn't reach completion overnight. It takes a lot of planning, and you have a goal in mind that you ultimately want to reach. Ours, again, for the entire organization, each club, is winning championships and creating great fan experiences. But it's a process, right? Looking back, for example, at the Dynamo's off-season last year, we only had a certain number of players that were out of contract. We had significantly more this past off-season, so it allowed us more flexibility to turn over the roster. And it's a process of continuing change. And so my expectation is that this isn't anything with a set conclusion beyond the championship goal. But for a fan experience perspective, for example, and making changes at this stadium and having an impact on the community, that's a continuing, never-ending process.
With the renovations, new coaches, roster change, are you expecting a pretty big surge in attendance for both the Dynamo and the Dash?
That's our hope, yeah. And look, want to give our fans an experience that is meaningful, first of all, through success on the pitch. And we all saw in instances last year, be it Hector Herrera's debut or a win over LAFC, where we had full houses here, and the building as we want to see it on a consistent basis. Same thing for the Dash playoff debut. This building was rocking, and so we want to make that a more consistent event. And beyond that, when they're here, we want them to have as enjoyable experience beyond what they see on the field as they can. And so we announced earlier this week our partnership with Chef Hugo Ortega to enhance and improve our food offerings here. We're going to be rolling out some announcements around other local restaurants that'll be coming into the building beyond Chef Hugo's specific restaurants in the coming weeks. And I feel great about having the diversity and richness of Houston reflected in the building in a way that it hasn't been before.
Has there been an uptick in season ticket sales during the season?
Sure, yeah, yes there has, yeah. And look, the more that we can provide a variety of offerings here for our fans. So if you look back over the last 18 months, we brought in safe standing on that side for our supporters, something that they'd been calling for a long time. We have the Shell Energy deck up here, which is an enhanced experience for fans that we brought in last season in frankly, an area of the stadium that was underutilized. We're bringing in mesh seats for a more comfortable experience for all of our fans, a new East Club. So there's a diversity of ways that they can experience the stadium, and I feel good about that.
I don't know if there's a specific dollar sign, but what insights can you give us into how much investment you put? It's obviously visible, but what can you tell us about what you put into the stadium? Obviously, there's a building across the street, the facility, and maybe how it compares also to the on-field product with all the staff changes in the offseason.
Yeah, so I can quantify with some specificity what we've done around the infrastructure side. On the roster side, I'll give you kind of a general outlook, and I know people like you, Victor, then go back at the end of the season and actually can track what we've done on the spend on our roster spend. But what I'll point out here, last season's changes between safe standing and the pitch deck was roughly $1.5 million, if I'm correct, Edgar. And the overhaul of the seating is a roughly $5 million improvement in the stadium. The East Club is a roughly $5 million project, so call that 15 between the seats and the East Club. We bought a building across the street where we'll be relocating our organization to its rightful location in Edo. And kind of a more befitting location and facility for a major league organization, which the Dynamo and Dash are, in a much larger sized footprint, 26,000 square feet compared to the 8,000 square feet that are in GRB. Between the site acquisition there and the redevelopment, we're in the kind of $12 to $15 million range. And again, I think that's appropriate to build a first-class organization, to give them the office that they deserve in the location that they need to be. Of course, we've been doing work over at HSP, working with the city to deliver another championship field, working on certain enhancements to make the facility a more hospitable place for our Dynamo and Dash players, with a longer-term goal of further improving that. Because we have a real opportunity there with the 26 World Cup to have that serve as a host location and to leave a legacy for our community beyond just our professional players, but to make it a top flight location for our fans and players in the community. On the roster side, I think what you saw last year was a jump from near the very bottom of the league to roughly the the 10th or so, 9th, 10th, 11th, somewhere in the kind of bottom of the top third. And as I've expressed before, there's recognition that you have a very, very good shot of qualifying for the playoffs if you're in that kind of range of spend, and that's generally where we've been targeting to be, with the objective of qualifying for playoffs and winning championships. We've also seen, without naming names, some flops who've spent at the very, very top of the league before. So I don't think it's necessary to be the number one spender as long as you're spending smartly and in kind of that competitive band.
But you put some more money into a lot of staff changes this past offseason. Scouting department, there's some changeover now with the academy. What can you speak to that, into investing on that side? That's not necessarily maybe the roster, but in the backroom area, and as far as the academy. Maybe what's the objective there? Is it more focused on player development? Do you want to make some money on these players like some other academies around the league? What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, thank you for reminding me about the staff changes that we're doing on the non-player side. And as a whole, our first step was having to play catch up with the rest of the league, because when we came in, we were far behind. And so building out the appropriate size coaching staff, building out the appropriate type of scouting, building out analytics, building out the appropriate medical and nutrition is just table stakes in this league, and something that was absolutely necessary and that we've done. On the academy side, there was an announcement, I believe yesterday, that Nick Koba is going to be overseeing the entire player development program, Nick being the GM of Dynamo Dos. And under him, Tony Vigil and Roy Lassiter are taking leadership positions as well. The objective there, foremost, is to develop players, and you'll have optionality over time whether to put them through your various tiers of the organization. Of course, there are options to sell them over time, and that would be a good outcome as well.
The Apple deal has sort of taken a local aspect out of your broadcast now. What can you tell us about how much you want to make out of maybe the radio deals and where those are at? And we can expect the same staff, Glenn and Eddie on the English side, Daniel and Caesar on the Spanish side.
So I'll say that announcements will be coming about specific announcers in the coming weeks on our radio broadcasts. Radio is going to be the one local means of hearing your game now that it's going to be a national broadcast on Apple. Ultimately, over time, I believe the league's goal is to have a function on the Apple broadcast where you can switch over on Apple rather than you having to calibrate it between your streamer and Apple to hear your local broadcast in English or Spanish. So that's a not 2023 outcome, but something that I know that the league and Apple are working to achieve.
Lastly, I think we've seen the landscape in media change a little bit here. Most recently with the cuts at SB Nation. Just as an owner, how much do you worry about the state of the coverage of the game in the United States, and what would you like to do?
Well, the more people here, including SB Nation or other outlets, the better. Because everything that we can do to raise awareness of the game is great for everybody, right? It educates the fan and it raises the popularity of the sport. So the more the better, in my opinion.
For the University of South Africa Sports Network, I would say thank you very much for giving us two West African players, Achara and Lassie. My question is this: looking at the renovation going on in the stadium, on the standing free zone over there, the plan was it to turn into a soccer-specific stadium, when we have like a few of them here in the country. And the second question is this: beside all this improvement going on here, is there any plan to do other entertainment stuff for halftime to improve or to give fans more experience at the stadium like this?
Yeah, so to your first question, Sam, yes, this is a soccer-specific stadium. It might hold alternate events, but far and away the primary purpose is for it to be a soccer-specific stadium. That's how it was designed. It was sort of I call it kind of the 2.0 version of soccer-specific stadiums. You saw the original versions in places like the first one that Columbus debuted about 25 years ago. Then you had this one come in about 10 years ago. And, in recent years, places like Austin have done an extraordinary job. Credit to them for delivering an outstanding stadium and stadium experience. What we're trying to do is being in the 2.0 version as compared to an Austin's 3.0 or a new Columbus's 3.0 is raise the experience to be on par with our friends who have more recently built. So again, that effort is ongoing. It's never going to be at its completion. It's just going to be every off season we're going to be trying to add something new. To your second question around half times, and then I'll further add on non-soccer dates, particularly when we have either international windows or in the off season. I would love to see this venue host more concerts and community events. For it to only be activated, a quarter of the year, I think it is not what I would like to see. And then halftime, I would say credit to our organization, credit to folks like Dash President Jess O'Neill for at the Dash playoff game we had a great halftime show with the Texas Southern Marching Band, which really reflected some of our local culture and gave, I think, a lot of fans who hadn't seen something like that before an authentic Houston experience.
I spoke about targets to make the playoff. Look at players coming in and those that left, and you said here that target is to make the playoff. Is it like I don't know, like a mandate to a new manager, saying that it's either the playoff or bust?
I don't think it needs to be a mandate to Ben because Ben's a very competitive guy, and Ben wouldn't be taking on the job if it wasn't his own personal mandate to qualify for the playoffs. Let me be very clear, nobody in this organization will be satisfied with the results of the past. And people like Ben, people like Sam at the Dash, Pat Onstad, Alex Singer, we all have the common objective of qualifying for the playoffs and competing for championships.
Can we expect any more, perhaps, star player signings this year? And do you feel like you've gotten a return on your investment with the signing of Hector Herrera last year with all the hype you saw after he was signed?
There will be more signings, and I'll direct some of those questions over to Pat, although he might be as cagey as I am right now. With respect to Hector's signing, look, it was a challenging season for Hector last year, coming in mid-season and then having a couple of nagging injuries. And with the World Cup on the horizon, I think understandably he wanted to be protective of his health. I think we have Hector this year, from what I'm hearing from camp, who's determined, who's a leader, and is focused on getting the results that he expects of himself and the club.
What's your message to fans, to Dynamo fans, to continue to believe in what the organization is doing going forward?
My message is I have high expectations for myself. I have high expectations for this club. I'm trying to make positive change across the organization. Hopefully you see that here today. And so I'm invested in this, and I hope my investment is commensurate to, I know how much the fans are invested.
We got room for two more.
I know soccer is growing in the US, and you are developing different projects. That I saw you the club launch international career that you did education project. Can you explain what kind of project this is? You try to take players to Europe. What is this
If I'm understanding the question correctly, I think the point is that in the past, perhaps we haven't been as robust in our search for international talent as what we hope to have going forward. And so we've really expanded our scouting operations and looking to places like Europe and what traditionally for us has been a hotbed in Central and South America, but enhancing that scouting operation. I think you've seen a number of those players, be it an Amin Bassi or Evander Kust from the Netherlands, as a reflection of some of the talent that we brought in from Europe in comparison to what we've done in the past.
You got time for one more?
Ted, I don't know if there's necessarily a deadline here, but with the World Cup coming to Houston in 4 years, potentially the Copa America next year, is there a plan, or what would you like to see in the next 4 years over that time span as we go gear up to the World Cup here in Houston, and what you would like this club to be and the city to be to get ready for that event?
Yeah, and let's not forget that we have a Women's World Cup. It's not here in Houston, but another major focal point in the international soccer calendar coming up this summer. And so I think for all of these tentpole events, there's always an enhanced interest in soccer in the United States. And I've said this before, when those events end, we have fans throughout the city, and we want those fans to recognize that this is the premier destination for top-flight soccer in the city of Houston, both on the NWSL side and on the MLS side.
Perfect. We'll close with that. Thank you very much.
Yep.
So
All right.
we are
All right.
around
Cool.
it.
All right. Cool. Thanks.